Okay, we're ready when you are.
Thank you. Okay, so we've called this Rabbi Akiva and the 8 Cedars of Lebanon. Now, if you see in the title here, I've called it the 10 Holy Martyrs. Yes, it's the 8 Cedars of Lebanon. Hopefully that dichotomy will come a little bit clearer as we go along. Let's start with a few lines of Gemara. So this is Gemara in Menachos. Menachos literally is talking about different, it's a type of carbon, the same word mincha, that was offered up in the times of the Beit HaMikdash. And here we go off topic a little bit. Olam Moshe Aaron. Moshe went upwards, right? It doesn't mean quite when he ascended Har Sinai. Maybe it was when he was on Mount Sinai, but he had some type of conversation with the divine. Amar Lafanov, and he says in front of him, in other words, he says to God, Rabboni Shalom, Master of the universe, Hirisani Torah, you've just shown me the Torah of Rabbi Akiva. Hareini Shacharo. I mean, this person is incredible. Rabbi Akiva, Moshe sort of like got to see in the future, and he got to see Rabbi Akiva's teaching, and Rabbi Akiva was darshaning, was explaining about the very letters of the Aleph base inside the Torah, and the various little tags. If you look carefully at this font of a Sefer Torah and to fill in the mezuzahs, you'll see that there's tiny little tags on, like they look like almost decorative tags on the corners of certain letters, right? A shin is a particularly difficult one, and it's really quite pretty. And Rabbi Akiva was explaining what they all represent at a sort of deeper mystical level. And Moshe hadn't really learned this aspect of Torah. So Moshe says, wow, I mean, this Rabbi Akiva is incredible. Hareini Saharo, show me what's his reward's going to be. Amalo, so Hashem, so to speak, says to Moshe, Chazor la'acharecha, turn backwards. Chazor la'acharecha, so Moshe turns backwards, and Ra'ah, he saw, Sheshoklim Basaro V'mikolin, he saw that they were tearing Rabbi Akiva's skin with iron combs, the most brutal of deaths. Amar Lafanov, so he says, Hashem, Rabboni Shalom, Master of the universe, Zu Torah v'Zu Sachara, is this the Torah and this is its reward? What's going on here? How does this make sense? So there's actually quite a few times throughout the Torah, throughout the Gemara, throughout Midrashic liturgy, where we see that Moshe challenges God. There's no other way of explaining this. Moshe challenges God with, why would bad things happen to good people? Where is the Sadik Varalo? Why, is there bad things that happen to tzaddikim, that happen to the righteous, and vice versa? We see sort of villains that get away with it, which really is the ultimate question of faith. But this is clearly something that Moshe, so to speak, struggled with. Amale, so listen to God's response. Stoke, be quiet, be silent. Kach Allah b'machshava lefanai, this is what I have decided, so to speak. Now, we would say normally the question is somewhat better than the answer, but he's not given an answer. Moshe is not given an answer. Hashem says, this is part of my master plan, and I cannot answer this. So that's going to sort of be our introduction to this kinnah. So we actually have this kinnah. We say there are two versions. There's actually three versions, but there are two versions of this kinnah which we say throughout the year. Right, one of them, which is known as Arve Halabonim, the Cedars of Lebanon, is one of the primary kinnos that's recited on Tisha B'Av. When we talk, I'm going to take a look at some of this soon, and it goes through 8 of the 10 Holy Martyrs. Right, so it's called, they're known as the 10 Holy Martyrs, but this version that we read on Tisha B'Av only discusses 8 of them. On Yom Kippur, there is a different version that's called Eila Ezkara. Eila Ezkara, which is the next source we're going to look at, has a different version of these 10. And what we're going to hopefully try and understand tonight is why. Why do we have these two versions? Couldn't we be consistent? Could we not perhaps take the same one and read it on Tisha B'Av and on Yom Kippur? And hopefully by understanding the difference, between these two tefillas, between these two prayers, these two accounts, we'll understand that they've got a different theme, one that speaks for Yom Kippur and one that speaks for Tisha B'Av, and should hopefully give us an insight as to where we're going, what's the point of a lot of the kinnos that we recite over Tisha B'Av. So here's one paragraph that we read on Yom Kippur, which we don't have any mention of this on Tisha B'Av, and it's a particularly haunting, it's a particularly telling aspect, and it's been made into a song. Let's read it for example. Tihe Rabbi Shmuel Atmo. So when all this was going on, this is the time of the Romans, right? These martyrs do not all take place at one time. We'll come back to this. They take place over at least a 60-year span. But the rabbis themselves were troubled by what's going on here. So they decided to send Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Shmuel Cohen Gadol was one of the holiest people. We know quite a few accounts of him. Rabbi Shmuel was certainly had some level of nevuah, some level of prophecy where he could speak to the divine, and they decided to send him up on the somewhat divine mission to try and find out what's this all about. Why have we got this decree? So Rabbi Shmuel prepared himself for this divine mission, so to speak, where he was going to go upstairs and speak to God, whatever that means. He purified himself. I'm assuming it's through maybe acts of chesed, going to mikvah. I don't know what this purification process is. And he mentioned that the special name, but sorry, the basiludim means of highs, right? So there's certain names of God which we don't know, which enable a person by uttering them, by concentrating on them, to somehow enter a special spiritual space. And he went up, and he inquired of the angel who's clothed in white, some mystical being. And the angel told him, accept this upon yourselves, righteous, beloved sages. This is the angel talking to Rabbi Ishmael. The angel says, I have heard from behind the curtain. Again, what type of curtains are upstairs, I don't know. But he's saying, I overheard from behind the curtain that this decree, this has been decreed upon you. And with this, somehow this is going to affect, this has come from, from all the way from upstairs. This is something God has decreed. No rhyme or reason, but this is sort of echoing somewhat this Gemara in Menachos. Yarad, Rabbi Shmuel went back down with his feet on earth, and he informed his colleagues of the word of God, and they accepted it. So there are certain aspects of this which we're never going to understand. Rabbi Shmuel Cohen Gadol couldn't understand, and Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand. Right, the why. So the why we can't look at, but hopefully the what somewhat we can understand a little bit. So let's take a bit of a closer look at this actual kinna. Right, we'll notice Arzeh Halavano, and it's written in an aleph-based order. Presumably it was written by Rabbi Meir ben Yechiel, who was in all likelihood, he was one of the authors of Tosfos living in Germany, or otherwise known as Ashkenaz. It's not, as we're going to see, it's got no connection with the destruction of the temple, because Tisha B'Av is not just about the destruction of the temple. And Rav Soloveitchik actually does explain exactly why we read this kinna now. But let's take a look, because we can talk all the way about the kinna without taking a look. So it's in aleph-based order, which is very common, right? The first line of each stanza begins with an aleph-based, which is very, very common. Even Eichor itself is written in aleph-based order. So Arzeh Halavon and Adira HaTorah, Cedars of Lebanon, masters of the Torah, Baalei Sareshim and Mishnah of Gemara, shield bearers in Mishnah and Gemara. Geborei Korach and Malachal B'Torah, powerful heroes toiling in purity. Right, so these 8, there's 10, but there's 8 that we're going to focus on here. these 10 martyrs who were powerful, who were the greatest of sages, among the greatest of sages that the Jewish people have ever really had. Their blood is spilt like water and their strength sapped. They are 10 holy ones, martyred by the kingdom. For them I cry and my eyes flow with tears. Now it's interesting, again, that we refer to them here as Haruge Malchus Asara, even though in this actual text, we only mention 8 of them. Okay, so that's the introduction. When I remember this, I cry a great and bitter cry. Israel's delight, holy vessels, a wreath and a crown, pure of heart, holiest of holy, slaughtered in a horrible death. So here we see already that that Rabbi Meir ben Yechiel, who we're assuming is the author, is comparing these 10 martyrs, these 10 holy sages, to the very vessels of the Mishkan itself. Right, Kalei HaKodesh, Nezav Atara. They are the kalim of the Mikdash. They are the vessels for the menorah and the Aron and the Mizbeach. But they're also Nezav Atara. They're the wreath and the crown of the Jewish people. So Torah scholars, people who devote their lives to learning Torah, represent sort of the crown of Torah. So they cast lots to determine who would be first to the sword. Now, again, we have to understand that this isn't referring to all of them. This is at most 2 or 3, because these generally did not happen in a short span of time. They happened over a couple of generations. So the lot fell upon Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, the second. Right. So there's a couple of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliels actually in the Talmud, and this is just from the time period they figured out it's got to be the second. He stretched his neck and cried, accepting his decree, and the executioner turned to Rabbi Shimon and killing him with fury. The descendants of Aaron, he's not named here, but he's mentioned again. We know who this is because of Ela Ezkara, which we read on Yom Kippur. Right, we know that's the Rabbi Yishmael who we just spoke about, when God went up on high, and there are other kinnos about him too. Right, so we just want to get through 2 more of these. The descendants of Aaron, Rabbi Yishmael the high priest, begged to be allowed to grieve for the prince, right, which is Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Right, he had a sort of Nasi role, a prince role. He took Rabbi Shimon's head, he placed it on his knees as if it were a pure menorah. Again, that reference, as if it were a pure menorah, that the attitude that we're supposed to have towards the sages is that they represent, as it were, the kalim of the Mishkan itself. He placing his eyes upon his eyes, his mouth upon his mouth with sincere love, he proclaimed, a mouth vigorous with terror, suddenly condemned to a horrible and strange death. He ordered to flay his death with a sharpened razor. He fulfilled with his skin the saying, and he quotes a pasuk from Yeshaya, get down that we may walk over you. The Rasha did the flaying, and as he reached the place of the tefillin, he let out a scream causing the world to shake and the earth to tremble. Okay, now we're going to come on to Rabbi Akiva. So this is the third of the sages according to this account at least. And then we can focus on him. Afterwards, they brought Rabbi Akiva. How's he described? Uprooter of mountains. Okaharim, uprooter of mountains. Again, that's referring to the way Rabbi Akiva spoke and his mastery of Torah. Uprooter of mountains means, he could lift up sort of huge topics, so to speak, and who ground one against the other with his intellect. So his power of being able to win people over in arguments, to challenge people's preconceived notions, was unparalleled. They combed his flesh with an iron comb to break it. His soul departed with the word one. Sorry, let's say, meaning Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. When he said the word Echad, that's when his soul left his body. And a heavenly voice said, Rabbi Akiva, you are fortunate. Ashrecha, as in Ashrei, right, which is a very, very strange thing to say. Rabbi Akiva, you are fortunate. This is Rabbi Akiva who has suffered the cruelest of deaths. Rabbi Akiva, you are fortunate. Your body is pure in every manner of purity. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to just take a look at Gemara, because the Gemara is a Gemara in Brachos, which really explains this story of Rabbi Akiva in a little bit more detail. So this goes back to, this is the Gemara which Oh, sorry, you can't. I'm not sure if you can see it. Can you see my mouse hovering? I'm not sure if you can. No. Okay. So I am.
Yeah, I can see it. You're highlighting a word.
Oh, you can. Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to highlight here and show where I'm pointing up to. So that's good. Thank you. So, but so what the Gemara typically does is takes words from the Mishnah and analyzes them. Right. So the Mishnah forms the first part of the Talmud, and the Gemara, as it were, is an explanation, a commentary on the Mishnah. So here we're quoting a few words, obviously, from the Mishnah, but it's quoting it from the Torah. So we're all familiar with this pasuk. And you shall love Hashem your God. So the Gemara goes into a bit of a discussion as to why we need all of those words. Why do we need, and you shall love Hashem your God, all of your heart, soul, and money, or resources, as we usually translate it. Why do you need all three? Right. So the Gemara goes into discussions about some people have got their priorities mixed up and they value their money more than their own body, etc. And this applies to everyone. So here we come to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Rabbi Akiva says, right, so obviously this is the Rabbi Akiva who we're focusing on, who gave his life, who was really devoted to loving God. With all of your soul, even if they take your soul. Meaning, be prepared to give up your life in the name of Hashem, in the name of your religion. Be prepared to give up your absolute life. Tana Rabbanon. So here comes the story. Tana Rabbanon, our rabbis have taught. Pa'amacha, one time, Gazra Malchus Horashah, the evil, wicked kingdom, or it's the Roman kingdom, decreed that the Jewish people should not involve themselves in terror. They wanted the Jewish people in Israel to assimilate, to integrate properly with Roman society. They wanted to get rid of the Torah as we know it, and they didn't want the classes to go on. Bar Papas Ben Yehuda. So Papas Ben Yehuda, that was his name. He came along. Rabbi Akiva. He found Rabbi Akiva, that he had assembled public gatherings, or gatherings in public, and he was delving in Torah. He had a full base of medrash up there learning in public, which was a capital offense. Amalei, he said to him, Akiva, are you not scared of the government? You know, the consequences of what can happen if you get caught. Amalo, so Rabbi Akiva says to him, and I imagine many of you will have heard of this, it's quite a famous parable. He goes, I will paint you a picture, I will explain to you a parable to what this is compared to. You have a fox that is going along the river, and he sees fish that are going from one place to the next. He says to them, obviously this is just a parable, it's nothing literal. So the fox says to the fish, what are you fleeing from? Where are you running away from? Why don't you just stay still? The fish said to the fox, we're running away from the nets which people are casting into the water. Right, there are fishermen that are trying to catch us fish, and we're fleeing from the nets. So the fox said to the fish, that's not a good idea. Come up onto the dry land and live with me. We're live together just like my fathers lived with your fathers, and everything will be peace and there'll be pacifism, everyone will get on side by side. If the threat is in the water, then come out of the water and I'll look after you. Omrulo, the fish, said to the fox, you're the one who they say about you, the fox, that you're the clever, wily one of the animals. You're not smart, you're a fool. If already in the place of where we have to live, the place of our water, if they're already afraid, in the place of our death, in other words, the place of dry land where we can't live outside of water, all the more so that we're going to die. In other words, our chances of living in the water, okay, at least this is where we can live, even if we're being threatened. But obviously we can't live on dry land. So too, so Rabbi Akiva said to Yehuda and Papas, the same as with us that now we sit and we dwell in Torah, Shekosafah, it's written about the Torah, the Torah is your days, is your life and your long days. If we go and we abandon the Torah, certainly we stand no chance. We're like a fish that has been removed from the water. Yes, our lives are being threatened in the water, but at least we can swim, at least we can live, at least we have a possible chance. But out of the water, remove the Torah from us, and we stand no chance. So that was the parable. Amru, they said, the sages said, Lo hayam ma'atim, it wasn't a few days, in other words, not much longer, Rabbi Akiva, they seized Rabbi Akiva, and they threw him into prison. And they also caught Papas ben Yehuda, and they incarcerated him next to him. So picture a dark cell with two cells next to each other, and you have Rabbi Akiva, who has been caught charged with the crime of teaching Torah, and next to him you have Papas ben Yehuda, who's in for other reasons. Amalo Papas. Papas said to him, he said to him, Papas, Rabbi Akiva said to him, Papas, who brought you here? Amalo. So Papas replied to Rabbi Akiva, Ashrecha Rabbi Akiva, it's the same word, Ashrecha. We said before that when Rabbi Akiva died, there was that heavenly voice that said, you're praiseworthy, that you're going out in the best possible way. But this is Papas, who is no sage himself, but he uses that same word, interestingly enough. He says, Ashrecha Rabbi Akiva, fortunate to you, Rabbi Akiva, Shenet Fasta al Divrei Torah, that you were caught for words of Torah. Oi loyla Papas, but woe is to Papas, he's referring to himself in the third person. Shenet Fasta al Devarim B'Teilim, he was caught for other things, meaningless things. Maybe he was smuggling or something. So these are two people who were in prison, and Papas is saying, we're both in prison, but I'm here for something silly. I stole or smuggled or something, but you're here for the most heroic of reasons. And the legacy that you, Rabbi Akiva, are leaving behind is greater than any other Talmudic sage. There is no Talmudic sage of the Mishnah Gemara who has the legacy of Rabbi Akiva. And somehow even Papas recognized this. And he says, Ashrecha, we're both going out, but at least you're going out with and leaving the greatest legacy behind, and for thousands of years we're learning the teachings of Rabbi Akiva and we're focusing on them. And maybe, just maybe, that gives us a little insight into that heavenly voice as well, that we sort of echo in the words of the Kinnah on Tisha B'Av. The Gemara continues, Bashar Shahutiras Rabbi Akiva, at the moment that they took Rabbi Akiva out Laharila to his final moments to be killed, Zaman Kriya Shema, it was the time of saying Kriya Shema, I presume of the morning. They were combing his body, with iron combs. And he was accepting upon himself literally the yoke of kingdom of heaven. So the three paragraphs of the Shema that we say, the first two, of course, are in the mezuzah. The three paragraphs have got a different theme. So essentially, the first paragraph of Shema is monotheism, is when we accept there is one God, and we commit to following God. The second paragraph is taking a step further. It's recognizing the mitzvahs of God and the fact that there are consequences for our actions. So when we refer to in the Gemara, we often refer to the first paragraph as Kabbalah al mitzvahs. Right. So the first paragraph of Shema is I'm accepting God and to live my life according to God's precepts. Amrlo Talmidov. So apparently there was some type of audience that was there when his life was being taken. And his disciples said to him, Rabbeinu, our teacher, Ad Kan, until here? I mean, really? You're actually dying, and as you're dying, you're saying Shema as if it was a regular day because it's the time of Kriya Shema? How do you do that? How does a person find that inner strength to be able to do that in such times? Amalahem. So Rabbi Akiva replied to them, and essentially these are his final words. Kol Yamai, he says, all my days, in other words, my entire life. I was bothered by this pasuk, right? That you should love Hashem your God, the whole nafshecha, with all of your soul. Afilu no tail nishmasa, even if you take your soul. Amarti, I said, Masa yavaliyati v'aytemenu. When will I ever have that opportunity? When will this opportunity literally come to my hand and I can fulfill it? Right. So in other words, to be able to demonstrate that devotion to Hashem, to my faith. And now that I do have the opportunity to do this, I shouldn't fulfill it. He elongated the word echad. And by the way, if you listen in shul, it is brought down in halacha. Many people do this. Right, when they say the first line of Shema, they say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. They sort of make a longer deal of the word Echad. I think the Yemenite Jews, by the way, do it better because according to halacha, it's supposed to be the last letter, which for Ashkenazim doesn't really work. Right, the letter D or Dalad is a closed symbol. Right, so we say Echad, and you can't elongate it. You can't make the D carry on any longer. But the letter. The way that the Yemenite Jews pronounce the Dalad is more like a guttural Z. So it would be like a chaz, and that you can elongate. So again, that's one of the sort of points of evidence. Maybe the Yemenites have got a stronger Masorah and more, their traditions are sort of like more like what it used to be. Be it as it may, he elongated this last letter, and Baskol, Yotza Baskol. So a heavenly voice came down from heaven, came out. The Amran, it said, again, the same word, Ashraka Rabbi Akiva. Fortunate is Rabbi Akiva, that your soul went out while declaring oneness in God. Amru Malachei Ashoris the heavenly angels protested at this point. And they said before Hashem, the Zuv Torah, the Zuv Sachara, this is like the first source we mentioned. This is the Torah, this is its reward. And Hashem basically said, I can't answer this one. Right. So again, the same challenge that we saw in the Gemara Menachos that Moshe made years before, hundreds of years before Rabbi Akiva lived. And Moshe challenged that Rabbi Akiva was destined to undergo such a tragic and brutal death. This was something that this is something that the angels themselves challenged, sort of almost echoing Rabbi Akiva's words years later. Let's just come back to one source. So what's this about? So the third source we have on this sheet is another Gemara. It's a Gemara in Rosh Hashanah, where the Gemara says, "Shekol misason shel tzadikim kisreifas beis Eloheinu." The death of righteous people is akin, is equivalent, is equal to the burning of the house of God. So Rav Soloveitchik really essentially explains that this is what we're doing on Tisha B'Av. There are two aspects of, there's a tragic aspect, which is what we do on Yom Kippur, on Tisha B'Av, where we are commemorating, where we are reliving the horrors, the tragedies of Galut, of the exile that we have, and recognizing that they are the Kalim of the Beis HaMikdash. It's as if the entire destruction all over again. On Yom Kippur, we're reading it for a totally different reason. On Yom Kippur, after every paragraph, we chant Chatanu Terenu Salach Lanu Terenu. We have sinned our rock, forgive us our creator. So there's a different theme to these two different versions. On Tisha B'Av, and really in the 9 days which we're doing at the moment, we are remembering the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. And this principle of that the death of the righteous is as catastrophic as the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So we're reading this as an expression of grief, not as a request for atonement. Right? On Yom Kippur, we read about Rabbi Shmuel's dialogue with God, because that reminds us that the 10 sages died willingly, and their doing so makes their actions even greater, their sacrifice even more precious, and therefore the atonement that we receive even greater. But that's not relevant on Tisha B'Av. It doesn't matter what their intentions were. Whether they went willingly, whether they didn't go willingly, we're not thinking about all that at the moment. What matters is the raw loss, the grieving, the pain, and what the world is now bereft of. How are we supposed to continue without these great leaders? And that's why we omit, according to Soloveitchik, that's why we omit this detail in the Kinnah. Right, so from Rabbi Akiva to Masada, from the Spanish Inquisition to the Crusades and the Holocaust, we've got a history of martyrdom, of sacrificing our lives to avoid more devastating options. And on Tisha B'Av, we reflect that the enemy may have succeeded in killing our bodies, but they have never succeeded in killing our Jewish soul, and they never will. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's it from me. And it's over to you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you.